Okay, so it really is a privilege for me to share the word with you this morning, and I came up with the catchiest phrase for my sermon last. Stories that reveal our Father's heart and what they may mean for us as kingdom carriers. So guys, the next hashtag, I'm sure. I did try with ChatGTP this morning to come up with something a little shorter, but they didn't do much better. So sorry about that. But sorry, this mic just, is it actually even on my ear? Anyway, there you go. So recently I've been working through some material for a course that we're wanting to run in October. And I came across this list of scriptures, and the heading was Stories That Reveal Our Father's Heart. And I was intrigued. So as I was pondering these scriptures and asking the Lord what he wanted to show me through them, I felt this thought drop into my mind and into my spirit. Because I've always read these particular scriptures, and you'll see what they are, in the context of understanding the Father's heart towards me. But I felt God wanting to take me just another step further. Because if these stories reveal the Father's heart towards the everyday, ordinary people that Jesus came into contact with, what is he possibly wanting to say to me through these stories about how I should be reflecting his heart to those around me? As a Christ follower, as someone who desires to become increasingly more like Jesus, as someone who is a kingdom carrier, as someone who desires to release the life of his kingdom, his will, his ways, his rule, and his reign wherever I go. But before I go into that, I actually felt like I wanted to frame the story, or just start what I wanted to share this morning with these scriptures, because I feel it is so important for us to remember these in terms of what being a kingdom carrier looks like, or not looks like, but just anyway. So, Matthew chapter 6, verse 10 says this: Jesus said we could pray, "Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." So we're encouraged to pray that just as God's will is done in heaven, may his will be done on earth. In other words, Jesus wants us to realize that we have a role to play through our prayer and through our actions in seeing God's kingdom come to earth as it is in heaven. We can ask for it and we can expect it. And then in Matthew 28, verse 18, oh gosh, am I going to remember to click? Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, even to the end of the age." So we can know and believe that Jesus has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. And with that knowledge, we can boldly go into our spheres of influence, to our families, our friend groups, our neighborhoods, our schools, our workplaces, our varsities, because the one who has been given all authority will be with us always, even to the end of the age. But then in Luke 10, verse 19, Jesus said to his disciples, "Behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you." So not only has Jesus been given all authority, not only has he said that he will be with us in our going, but there is an authority that we have been given to release the rule and the reign and the will and the ways of Jesus over all that the enemy has power over. We get to be touch points or conduits of heaven to earth. So if you are a true Christ follower, and let me add here that not everyone who says they are a Christian, unfortunately, are Christ followers, But if you are a true disciple of Jesus, then you get to be a kingdom carrier who can enjoy the privilege of releasing and enforcing the kingdom of heaven here on earth. So, with that in mind, I want us to look at a couple of stories that reflect the Father's heart. And the first story I'd like to look at is found in John chapter 4, verse 1 to 26, the story of the Samaritan woman at the well. Now, to summarize the story, because it will take too long to read, Jesus, weary from his journey, stops at Jacob's well in Samaria, and a Samaritan woman comes to draw water. Jesus initiates a conversation with her, something which is highly unusual for a Jewish man to do with a Samaritan woman, especially one with her background, because Jews typically avoided Samaritans due to long-standing ethnic and religious tensions. In fact, Samaritans were despised by the Jews because they had intermarried with non-Jews in their territories, and were thus considered a mix of spiritually corrupt Israelites and pagan foreigners who had created their own religion that to the Jews was considered heresy. To add to this, women were culturally second class at that time, and this woman in particular was morally outcast because she'd already had 5 husbands, and the man that she was with currently was not her husband. But during this dialogue, Jesus treats her very differently to what would have been expected. He speaks to her about living water, and then gently and kindly reveals knowledge about her personal life, showing that he is a prophet. Then he reveals his identity as a Messiah, and then ministers truth with such grace towards her. She is so moved that she leaves her water jar, runs into the town, and tells everyone that she comes across about Jesus. And many Samaritans come to see Jesus and believe in him because of her testimony and then obviously what Jesus shared. The challenge from the Father that I felt when I read this story that reflects his heart was this: who in my sphere of influence would be my Samaritan woman at the well? Who has God placed in my path that I might consider spiritually corrupt or morally questionable? Is there someone who lives out their faith differently to me that I struggle with because I don't agree with their theology and it makes me uncomfortable? Is there someone who makes life choices that totally oppose what I would do? How hard do I find it to express the Father's heart to these kinds of people? You see, if God seeks the outcast, as he did with the Samaritan woman, and pursues the rejected, if his heart is for those on the margins, if he is not distant but draws near to the brokenhearted, if he doesn't shame them but he offers them truth wrapped in grace, if he sees all of them, the pain, the patterns, the searching, and still offers love and salvation, if he knows them deeply, meets them where they are, and loves them still, if he is loving, pursuing, gracious, truthful, inclusive, deeply personal, and invites every person, no matter their past, to come and drink deeply of him and live, if this is how he would interact with people that we as Christians might consider spiritually corrupt or morally questionable, what does he expect of me? What does he expect of you? How do these kinds of people that God has placed in my sphere of influence experience me? My neighbors, who are a married lesbian couple, a family member who says they are a Christian, but they're a little promiscuous, a work colleague who's pro-choice if you're pro-life, or pro-Palestine if you're pro-Israel, or pro-Trump if you can't stand him, or more liberal and you're more conservative. How do you think they experience you? You see, we can sometimes find it so hard to love someone well because it feels like we are in some way endorsing their behavior or their belief that might be contrary to what we feel comfortable with. I mean, the Samaritan woman had a lot going on in her life that we would raise our eyebrows to. But what does Jesus do in these kinds of moments? He pressed in with curiosity to hear her story. He made her feel seen. He made her feel heard. He made her feel loved. And yet, still managing in the most kind and grace-filled way to address the behavior that was hurting her and hurting others, but in a way that led to transformation that impacted an entire community. I mean, this challenges me. Friends, we are kingdom carriers, and part of what releasing the kingdom looked like to Jesus was reflecting the heart of his Father as he interacted with others. The second story is the one of the woman with the issue of blood, found in Mark chapter 5, verse 21 to 34, who is healed when she touches Jesus' cloak. Now, in summary, Jesus is on his way to heal the daughter of Jairus, who was a respected synagogue leader. In fact, his daughter was literally on its deathbed. In fact, because of the delay, she dies, but then we don't need to worry because he resurrects her. But when a woman who had suffered with bleeding for 12 years pushes through the crowd and touches his garment. Now, according to Jewish law, she would have been considered unclean and would have been isolated from society and worship. But when she touches Jesus, she is instantly healed. Jesus stops, asks who touched him, and when the woman came forward, trembling, he calls her daughter, and he commends her faith. You see, this woman was nameless in Scripture. She was ceremonially unclean and would have been untouchable and forgotten by society. I mean, she would have been considered ceremonially unclean for like 12 years. But she was not forgotten by God. Though surrounded by a crowd, Jesus feels her touch and stops everything, because no one is too unclean for him. Are there people that God has placed in our path who are too unclean for you or for me? And I'm not speaking physically unclean. See, the Father sees those who feel unseen. He sees those who feel invisible. He welcomes the desperate, and he invites us as Christ followers to do the same. This is both challenging and inspiring for me. Who might fall into this category in our lives? Who are the people we tend to overlook or take little notice of? Could it be someone who is in a more junior position to you at work? Maybe they're more blue collar and you're more white collar. What about the people who work in our home or in our gardens? In Christian circles, who are the people that we would not want to be associated with because we might be tainted if people saw us with them? We might be brushed with the same unclean brush. You see, Jesus doesn't rebuke this woman, even though touching a rabbi while ceremonially unclean could have led to public disgrace or punishment. Instead, he publicly affirms her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." He speaks identity and value over her. He was so less concerned with keeping up religious appearances. What things theologically are hindering you and me from loving people well? Are there possibly scriptures that we've interpreted in a way that limit us from loving people well? Rules can make us feel safe, but we can interpret them through a legalistic lens that is actually opposed to grace. Here, Jesus shows us that mercy triumphs over judgment. She came in fear and trembling, expecting shame, and the Father responded with tenderness, and there was no shame. Even though Jesus was on an urgent mission to help Jairus, a respected leader, he stopped everything for an unnamed woman, because to him, there is no hierarchy of worth. Can we say the same? Can I say the same? See, Jesus interrupts for the one. He notices the hurting. He honors faith. He stops for the overlooked. He restores dignity. And he invites us Christ followers to do the same. Friends, we are kingdom carriers, and part of what releasing the kingdom looked like to Jesus was reflecting the heart of his Father as he interacted with others. The third story is found in Matthew chapter 12, verse 9 to 14, where Jesus heals a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath, nochal, in front of religious leaders who were looking to accuse him. Now Jesus enters a synagogue. There's a man with a withered hand, and the Pharisees ask him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? Not because they were curious, but because they wanted to trap him. Jesus responds with a question. If you had a sheep fall into a pit on the Sabbath, wouldn't you lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? And then he tells the man, stretch out your hand, and it's completely healed. But instead of rejoicing, the Pharisees begin plotting to kill Jesus. You see, this is not just a story about a miracle. It's a window into the heart of the Father, especially in contrast to rigid, rule-based religion. Because the Father values people over rules, but do we? The Pharisees may have highly valued Scripture, but they failed to actually catch the heart of the Father in them. And it limited their ability to love the man with the withered hand well. They were more concerned about keeping the Sabbath than caring for the suffering. And we can read the Scriptures that tell us about the best way to live our lives, and they can be so incredibly life-giving for us, or they can become the letter of the law with which we judge people, and it ends up limiting our ability to love people well. See, the man with the withered hand was likely seen as defective or cursed in that culture, marginalized, maybe even blamed for his condition. But Jesus saw his worth and called him to the center so he could restore his dignity. See, the Father sees dignity where others might see brokenness. He sees value in every person. Do we? Do I? Who in our circles do we look at, and while we may not say it out loud, do we secretly blame for the way their lives have ended up because possibly their bad choices are quite obvious? But despite their mistakes, can we see their worth? Can we see their dignity? Can we see their value? Would they be safe in our hands? Or would our words sound more like the accuser of the brethren than Jesus? In verse 14, it says that after Jesus healed the man's withered hand, the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. You see, Jesus knew this healing would escalate the opposition, but he did it anyway because he is fearlessly compassionate. He acts even when it's costly. This reveals a God who will risk everything to love and to restore, and he invites us to do likewise. Friends, we are kingdom carriers, and part of what releasing the kingdom looked like to Jesus was reflecting the heart of his Father as he interacted with others. The fourth story is the story about the lost sheep found in Matthew 18, verse 12. And that verse says, what do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? In a world that often ignores the individual in favor of the majority, Jesus said, one matters. God's heart is not just for the crowd, it's for the person who strays. He feels the absence and takes action. He notices when we go missing. The shepherd leaves the 99 and goes after the one. This isn't passive concern, it's intentional pursuit. God doesn't just wait for the lost to find their way back. He goes looking, and he doesn't give up on us. Leaving 99 sheep on the mountain while you go after the one seems reckless, but that's how radical the Father's love is. From a worldly point of view, it doesn't make sense. But to the Father, every soul is worth the effort. In verse 13, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. You see, the Father isn't scolding when he finds the one. He's celebrating. His response to the wandering soul isn't anger, it's joy. God's desire is not judgment, but it is redemption and restoration. His will is that no one would be lost, not even the most broken, the most rebellious, or the most overlooked. And if this is the Father's heart towards those of us who stray away from a relationship with him, I believe he would want us to do likewise. But it can be difficult for us. We see a friend or a family member who used to be on fire for Jesus, and they're starting to make decisions that are contrary to the ways of Jesus, and judgment is quite a natural response. Maybe they date or marry an unbeliever. Maybe they move in together before they're getting married. Maybe they start partying and drinking excessively in a way that clearly shows that they're not pursuing Jesus as closely. Maybe it's your child, and you see them playing online games instead of spending time with Jesus like they used to. Maybe they stop even going to church, and we can feel quite desperate. But just remember, the heart of the Father is not shame, judgment, guilt, or condemnation. So we need to be particularly careful that we don't represent him in that way. And when we do pursue those who are straying, it is very important that we press in to the voice of the Father to see how we are meant to go about doing it with that particular person. Because there is a chance that if we use our own human wisdom, they will run even further away from God. But always remember that the Father's pursuit never looks like scolding, judgment, or anger, no matter how broken or rebellious they are. So just like the Father, let us not grow weary in doing good. The Father's heart is inclusive and redemptive. May ours be too. But I do want to say something to those who have a gift of mercy, to those who find it very easy to pursue the lost and the wounded and the overlooked. Make sure you too hear carefully the voice of God as to how you are meant to help. Often those with a mercy gift get burnt out and disillusioned because they can very easily get taken advantage of if they are not obedient to the voice of the Father in how they help. Or they help in ways that actually perpetuate unhealthy cycles instead of breaking those cycles, helping to break those cycles. What we're wanting is restoration. Friends, we are kingdom carriers. And part of what releasing the kingdom looked like to Jesus was reflecting the heart of his Father to those he interacted with. The fifth story I want to share is from John 21, verse 15 to 19. It's the moment Jesus reinstates Peter after his 3 denials. See, after his resurrection, Jesus meets his disciples at the Sea of Galilee. Over breakfast, he gently leads Peter in a threefold exchange. It's Simon Peter. Jesus says to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter says, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." And Jesus says, "Feed my lambs." And this happens 3 times in a way mirroring, and I just don't know how to say that well, mirroring Peter's denials, but not to shame him, but actually to restore him. See, Peter had failed publicly and painfully, yet Jesus doesn't disqualify him. He restores him. He doesn't reject the fallen. He gently heals, and then he recalls them. Jesus doesn't ask, "Will you try harder?" He just asks, "Do you love me?" Because love, not perfection or performance, is the basis of our calling and our relationship. You see, each time Jesus follows Peter's answer with a commissioning: feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. This isn't just forgiveness. This is purpose renewed. The Father's heart is always drawing us close, no matter what we've done. Do you love me? It's not an accusation, it's an invitation, because that's the Father's heart. So how do we reflect that heart? Do we restore what shame tried to ruin? Do we ask gentle questions, not to condemn, but to understand? Do we rebuild trust through love and not fear? Because, friends, we are kingdom carriers. And part of what reflecting the kingdom looked like to Jesus was reflecting the heart of his Father as he interacted with others. And the final story is the feeding of the multitudes, found in Mark chapter 6, verse 30-44. Now, on the surface, this looks like a story about the miracle of provision. But when we look more closely, we see it beautifully revealing the heart of the Father through Jesus' actions. The disciples return from ministry exhausted. Jesus invites them to rest, but a large crowd follows. Jesus has compassion on them. He teaches them, then he tells his disciples to feed them. Though they only have 5 loaves and 2 fish, Jesus blesses it, multiplies it, feeds the thousands, and there are 12 baskets left over. And I love how it says in verse 34, he had compassion on them. See, Jesus wasn't annoyed or inconvenienced by the crowds. This wasn't just pity. This was love in action. Jesus tells the disciples in verse 37, you give them something to eat. He knows they can't do it in their own strength, but he invites them to participate in his work and into his compassion. See, the Father's heart aches for the lost, the directionless, and the needy. He sees the hunger, the confusion, the exhaustion, the deeper needs, and he invites us into his mission, not because he needs us, but because he wants us to share in his heart for others. Jesus doesn't produce the food out of thin air. He uses what the disciples have, which is clearly not enough, but in his hands, it becomes more than enough. And as kingdom carriers, it is so important to remember that he isn't limited by what we lack. He asks for our little, and he makes it overflow. Friends, we are kingdom carriers, and part of what releasing the kingdom looked like to Jesus was reflecting the heart of his Father as he interacted with others. But it's easier said than done sometimes. But the more we can recognize the heart of the Father towards us, the more we can reflect his heart to those that he has placed around us. And here at Immanuel, we want to do all that we can to lift shame off of people so that they feel safe to share what is really going on in their lives. Because for us, it's all about seeing people restored to who God created them to be, so that they can fill the plans and purposes that God created for them. So this morning, I do want to create just a moment, and if you are comfortable to close your eyes, if you're not comfortable, don't. But I want to actually give us a little bit of time this morning to just sit before the Lord. I'm going to ask you some questions and just create space for maybe the Holy Spirit to maybe he wants to bring somebody to mind for you. Because I want to ask us this morning, and I ask myself these same questions. Who is our Samaritan woman at the well? Who is our woman with the issue of blood? Who is our man with a withered hand? Who is our lost sheep that's gone astray? Who is our Peter that denied Jesus and needs to be restored? Who's needing our compassion? In what way is God asking us to participate in his work? What might you have in your hands that seems not enough, but can be made into more than enough if we place it in his hands? In what way is God asking you this morning to reflect his heart to those in your sphere of influence, and in so doing, release the life of his kingdom into lives in a way that if they can just see him right, they might turn towards him?